Again, Erev Shabbos, everybody. Welcome to Jerry's Parsha Ponderings for Parshat Ki Tisa, my Afraf Parsha. So, a Parsha I've been over a couple of times, and believe me, I could go 2 hours easy on Ki Tisa, but I don't think you'd listen. So we're going to try to let some same here a little bit to, keep it reasonable. So when we, at the last week's Parsha, we discussed the fact that Moshe, when he was begging for the Bnei Yisrael to be forgiven for the Chet HaEgel, which happens in this week's Parsha, he said, V'yem ayin macheni na misifrecha asher katafta. Wipe me out from your book if you don't forget them, if you don't forgive them. And as we know, because of that, Moshe's name was left out of last week's Parsha Tetzaveh. And it's interesting because it was actually the sin of Lashon Hara. You know, Moshe's up on the mountain and he's not going to come down, and this is it. We need to make a new god, small g. And the Erev Rav were able to, get enough people into their camp where they dropped the big one over here. So now we're left with Moshe. We're not going to go over how it happened, why it happened. The Mefarshim are loads to read on this. But I want to focus on the whole forgiveness process. So Moshe, finally Hashem forgives them, and he says, fine, I'm not going to destroy them. But the Shekhinah is not going to travel inside the camp. Why? And this is very interesting. Hashem says, "V'shalachti lefanecha malach v'geirashti et haknani ha'emori v'hachiti v'aprizi hachivi v'yevusi." I will send a malach, angel. Okay? Angel. Right? I'm going to send an angel, and he will get rid of the Canaanite nations, and you'll move in. And we know that wasn't done in 1 year. It was done gradually so that the land wouldn't lie fallow for too long. That's another question. But what's with the Malach? Who's the Malach? Gabe? Mike? Which Malach is this? So the answer is it doesn't really miss. Some say Gavriel, some say... The Malach is natural course of events, right? I will put it on autopilot, as it were, right? The force, if you will, right? Hashem says, okay, this will happen through the intermediary of a Malach, and we say that the nations of the world also have their own Malachim. I don't know if we're talking about flap, but a force that works along the derech hateva. What does Moshe say? Yeah, and Hashem says, why? Ki lo ala bekir b'cha ki am ksheora fata penachelcha badarech. Right? Because you're a stiff-necked nation. What else is new? And, you're going to rebel, and, God... people always say, how could a God, a good God do this? And I can't believe in a God that would do terrible things, and why do kids have cancer, and why are there wars? God isn't Santa Claus, right? We tend to mix these two up. There's reward, there's punishment. We are ultimately, unlike the rest of the animal kingdom, the rest of the carbon-based life forms, we have the gift of intelligent thought. When we come around to Bereshit again and the tree, we'll go through this in greater detail. But unlike the beasts of the field, and unlike my two lovable Samoyeds, we don't act only on instinct. We have intelligent thought, and we can make choices. And ultimately, we are the result of our choice. So what Hashem is saying here, okay, you want to live like the rest of the world that worships garbage? Okay, we can do that. I won't destroy you, but, see, what did they say? Fafo? I can't translate that. But, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? That's what'll happen. Okay. Moshe is not happy with this result. He says, no, 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 no. Listen. And you know, for a while, the tent's outside the camp. Finally, Moshe's up on the mountain. He's back in the talking. He's talking to the big guy, and we're not talking about Joe Biden, the big guy. Chas v'shalom lahavdil elef alfei abdullas. Would they run oilam? But no, we're talking about, you know, the big guy with the capital G. And he says, no, I want you still to travel amongst us. Right? Hashem spoke to Moshe panim el panim, whatever that means, because lo yirani ha'adam v'chai, but he had a exchange with Moshe Rabbeinu, the likes of which has never happened before and will never happen again. And Moshe was able to plead with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, V'yata imna matzati chen be'einecha hodieni na drachecha va'edoacha l'manem tzachen be'einecha ure'ei ki amcha hagoy hazeh. This is one of the most fascinating and esoteric and hard to understand parts of the entire Torah. He says, I want to understand your ways, right? I want to understand your ways so that I can find favor in your eyes and that you will see that Am Yisrael are indeed your people despite their human frailties. And what does he say further? Im ein panecha olchem al ta'aleinu mizeh. One thing about Moshe, he had chutzpah. I mean, Levi. Yeah. But Moshe had real chutzpah in a good way. He like challenged God. Like, wow. And he says, if you're not going to be amongst us, what does he mean by being amongst us? Well, we have to go back. V'yasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. We discussed that, right? If you're not going to be amongst us, don't bother. Leave us here in the desert. We'll be Bedouins. And what v'neflinu ani ve'amcha mikol ha'am asher al pnei ha'adama. And you'll see how that we are, how shall we say, exalted above all others. Hashem says, Gam es hadavar asher dibarta aseh. Fine. Mo, you got me. I'm going to do this. But in order to do this, you have to understand something. And he says, come up here, Moshe. Stand in the cleft of the rock. Right? And he says, I'm going to pass over you, having nothing to do with the holiday, and I will cover you with my hand. And then I will take my hand away and uncover you. V'hasiroti et kapi v'ra'ita et achorai, as it says on the screen, ufanai lo yera'u. What is going on here? So Hashem is telling Moshe, you have to understand what having Hashem Bekir B'cha means. It's not so simple. With great power comes great responsibility. Thank you, Aunt May. Right? What is Hashem saying? Oh, you want the Shekhinah to travel in your camp. You want to be part of the Am HaNivchar. You want to be an Am Segula? Hey, that comes at a price. So you're not just going to be like the rest of the nations. You're not going to just live by the force. You're going to have, dare I say, hashgacha pratis. Now, when you get into the Ramban and the Rambam on hashgacha pratis, it gets very shticky. I'm not going to say every human being has their own personal hashgacha pratis, because that's a machlokas, but certainly Am Yisrael, as a nation, has this special hashgacha, this special care by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that comes at a price. So he says, understand what you're asking. V'haya ba'avar kvodi v'samticha b'nikras hatzur. Throughout Jewish history, Rabbosai, Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu and thereby telling the rest of us, V'haya ba'avar kvodi, my glory will pass before you, v'samticha b'nikras hatzur. You're going to be caught between a rock and a hard place. Sound familiar? October 7th, 80 years ago, the Spanish Inquisition, I can keep going, blood libels. Look at what's going on in the world. Am Yisrael, the Israelis killed 30,000 Palestinians. If this was an actual war, the likes of which the world fought in World War II, there'd be at least a 0 on that number. No nation on earth in history ever, and probably ever will, do more to prevent civilian casualties than the IDF. There's no question. Everything is videoed. My son Moshe, who's a paratrooper, had a GoPro. He's got everything on video. They bent over backwards to try to avoid civilian casualty, yet we are being accused of genocide. They don't even know what genocide means. Believe me, the Jews are pretty good at anything they try. If we wanted to do genocide, it would have been over in 15 minutes. But, no. You're going to be between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, you're fighting for your lives. On the other hand, the whole world is standing against you. V'sakosi kapi alecha adavri. And I'm going to cover you. You're not going to see what's going on. It's going to look really ugly. Right? V'hasiroti kapi. And then I'll lift my hand away. V'ra'ita et achorai. You're going to see my back. What does it mean? They say he showed him the kesher tefillin. Does God actually wear tefillin? I don't know. I doubt it. God doesn't have a body. He's the force, right? Basirot kapi, pure energy. Where are you putting tefillin? Basirot kapi v'ra'ita et achorai. You're going to see my back. What does it mean, my back? You're going to look at this with 20/20 hindsight. Ufanai lo yero. But when you're going through that terrible nisayon, like we're going through right now, that we've been through throughout all of Jewish history, the blood libels and the anti-Semitism, which will never go away. It's the oldest form of hate, right? It's there. There's nothing we can do about it. It's there to test us and to keep us separate, right? Ufanai lo yeru. But when you're going through it, you're not going to understand. Only after I take away my hand and you'll see, oh my God, God was protecting us. You know, we were saved from a civil war. Let's be real. We saw what was going on before the war. It was an Egel Hazav on speed, right? Hashem saved us. I mean, hard to say. My son's a combat soldier. He's seen horrors that no 21-year-old should see, no 71-year-old should see. No human being should have to see what he saw. I won't even say, right? You could see it on YouTube. But nonetheless, we're still going through this terrible birth pang of the redemption, the aschalta de geula, the birth pangs of the geula. Very difficult times, but we're being protected. We don't realize we're being protected, but we are. Some of us do. Moshe certainly done, right? But during the times that we're going through right now, it'll only be after, when we see what the result of this is going to be. And this is a 1948 moment. This is one of those, the sea changes in the world. The world's never going to be the same after 10/7, just like the world was never the same after 1948 or 1967 or 9/11 or 1776. This is one of those moments. Everything is going to change. And afterwards, we'll see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu protected, how God protected his people, and how his hand is over us, protecting us from what could have been a whole heck of a lot worse. And I think we all know, you know, how bad things can get. Moshe prays to Hashem, Hashem kel rachum v'chanan, the 13 midot of Hashem, and Hashem says, Hine anochi kored brit, I am making a brit, not the Brit, but you know, that too, but I'm making a covenant with you, Am Yisrael. Asher lo nevru b'chol haaretz u'b'chol hagayim v'ra'a kol ha'am asher ata b'kirbo et maseh Hashem ki norahu asher ani oseh imach. Fine, we are going to make this covenant. Moshe agrees. When he says Hashem kel rachum b'kanan, he kavyachol shakes hands with God and says, fine, we're going to make the deal. And Hashem says, fine, I'm making a covenant with you. You are my chosen people, with all the responsibility that comes with. V'ra'ah kol ha'am. The whole world is going to see Asher Ata Bika, that you are, Hashem is amongst us. How do they see that? Well, the smallest number of people on earth that have been through hell, high water, you name it, here we are walking on the graves of our persecutors and producing more good for the world than any nation ever has or ever will. The 14 million Jews with their Nobel Prizes, more than anybody on earth. Go figure. Right? And what do we get for it? Blood libels, anti-Semitism, river to the sea, free Palestine, all this BS. Right? But that's part of the deal. That's part of the deal. They know. Of course they know. They feel it. They can't wrap their heads around the fact. How is it that these people that have been beaten, abused, and pogromed and holocausted, how are they the leaders in every industry? Asher ata b'kirbo et maseh Hashem ki norahu. Who's the ultimate creator? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who does he use to create? Hello. And this is what happens. And finally, after we make the Brit, the covenant with Hashem, Hashem tells us, Shmar lecha. Listen, hezach tziavart. Listen carefully, Yidden, to what I'm telling you. Asher Shmar lecha et asher anochi metzavcha hayom. Hineni is going to send out the Canaanite nations. They're long gone. And then he says, this is interesting because he says we're sending out the Canaanite nations, right? And then the pasuk says, interestingly, Hishamer lecha pen tichrod brit liyoshev haaretz asher ata ba'aleha pen yihiyeh lemokesh bikirbecha. Be very careful not to make a treaty with the people in the land, whomever that is, the non-Jews of the land. Pen yihiyeh lemokesh bikirbecha. It will be a snare. A mokesh is also a landmine. Right? In other words, this, you can't do that, because if you want to be a skula nation, living in a skula country, you have to make yourselves misugal. You can't, it's like a bird could love a fish, but where would they make a home together? There's no treaties, there's no two states, there's one state. The whole thing is nonsense. Every time we tried to do it, unfortunately, we were rebuffed. Because it's not meant to be. It's not going to happen. Rav Kahana Zechatzad Kadosh L'Vracha Schusa Yagen Aleinu used to say, we can always count on the Arabs to save us from ourselves. Hard to say, but this is exactly what Hashem has told us. We made a deal. We had choice. We used our God-given gift of choice and intelligence to make a deal with the creator of the world that we will be his emissaries. And like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. Rabbi say, get in there of Shabbos. Parshas Ki Tisa, wow. There's so much to read. Please spend some time going over the Parsha this week. You won't be disappointed. Make it a beautiful and peaceful and full of ruchnius Shabbos. And let's enjoy being the Skula nation living in the Skula land. Shabbos Makar HaBracha. Shabbat.